They told her she had 3 months to live. The doctors closed the file, looked away, and whispered what they always whisper when science reaches its limit. There's nothing more we can do, but here's what they didn't know. What they couldn't measure with their machines and couldn't see in their scans, that God doesn't operate on human timelines. He doesn't need permission from a diagnosis. And what happened next would shake the foundations of everything those doctors thought they knew about life, death, and the impossible. This isn't just another feel-good story. This is about the collision between medical certainty and divine intervention. About the moment when faith stands face to face with facts and refuses to blink. Because somewhere between the hospital room and the prayer room, between the final diagnosis and the first miracle, something happened that science still can't explain. And if you've ever been told something was impossible, if you've ever stood at the edge of hope with nowhere left to turn, what you're about to hear might change everything you believe about what's possible. There's a specific kind of silence that fills a hospital room when a doctor says the word terminal. It's heavy, suffocating, final. Sarah felt that silence wrap around her like a shroud when the oncologist delivered the news. Stage 4, metastasized, inoperable. The tumor had spread like wildfire through her body, and every test, every scan, every second opinion confirmed the same devastating truth. Medically speaking, this was the end of the road. They gave her 3 months, maybe 6 with aggressive treatment, but even that, they admitted, would only buy time, painful, difficult time. The science was clear. The statistics were merciless. Every medical professional in that room agreed this was impossible to reverse. But Sarah had learned something in her 43 years on this earth. She had learned that doctors see what's in front of them, but God sees what's coming. She had learned that prognosis is not prophecy. And she had learned that the word impossible sounds very different depending on who's saying it. That night, alone in her bedroom with test results scattered across the bed like evidence of defeat, Sarah didn't bargain with God. She didn't make promises or deals. She simply said, I don't understand this, but I trust you. If you want me here, keep me here. If you want me home, I'm ready. But I'm asking no, I'm believing that you can do what they say you can't. It was raw. It was honest. It was the kind of prayer that only comes when you've got nothing left to lose and everything to gain. And in that moment, something shifted. Not in her body, not yet, but in her spirit. A peace that made no logical sense settled over her like a blanket. A knowing that whispered beneath the panic. This isn't over, she called her church. She called her family. She asked everyone she knew to pray, not for comfort, but for a miracle. Not for strength to endure, but for complete, total, impossible healing. And they did. Prayer chains started. Churches across 3 states added her name to their lists. Strangers began interceding for a woman they'd never met. And in the invisible realm where faith operates, something began to move. 3 weeks later, Sarah went back for a routine scan. The technician's face changed as she looked at the screen. She called in another technician, then another. They whispered, checked the machine, ran the scan again. Finally, they told Sarah she'd need to wait for the doctor to review the images. When the oncologist walked in 2 hours later, he was holding the scans in one hand and her previous files in the other, comparing them like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. I don't understand this, he said slowly. The tumor in your lung is smaller, significantly smaller, and the spots on your liver, some of them aren't showing up anymore. Sarah felt her heart stop. What does that mean? I don't know, he admitted. This doesn't happen with this type of cancer, not without treatment. Not this fast. We need to run more tests. But Sarah knew. Before the tests, before the confirmations, before the medical explanations that would never come, she knew. God was moving. Over the next 3 months, the impossible became undeniable. Scan after scan showed the same pattern. Tumors shrinking, disappearing, vanishing like morning fog under sunlight. Her cancer markers dropped. Her energy returned. Her pain decreased. The medical team ran every test they could think of. They checked for lab errors. They questioned their original diagnosis. They brought in specialists from other hospitals, and every single one came to the same conclusion. Medically, this made no sense. One doctor, a man who practiced oncology for 30 years, sat down with Sarah and said something she'd never forget. In all my years, I've seen remissions. I've seen unexpected responses to treatment, but I've never seen this. You're not on treatment. You haven't changed anything in your lifestyle. And yet your body is healing itself in ways that defy everything we know about this disease. I can't explain it. I won't insult your intelligence by trying to take credit for it. Something beyond medicine is happening here. Sarah smiled. That something has a name, she said. And he's been working miracles since before medicine existed. Word of Sarah's healing spread like wildfire through the hospital, then through her community, then beyond. Other patients started asking about her. Nurses whispered about the miracle case on the 4th floor. Doctors began referring to her file in hushed tones, not because it was confidential, but because it challenged everything they'd been taught. 6 months after her terminal diagnosis, Sarah walked into her oncologist's office for what everyone assumed would be another monitoring appointment. Instead, after a full-body scan and comprehensive blood work, the doctor looked at her and said 5 words that still give her chills. "We can find no cancer, no cancer. Not in remission, not responding well, no, cancer." The impossible had happened. The medically inexplicable had manifested in flesh and blood. God had said otherwise, and reality had bent to his will. But here's where the story gets even more powerful. Sarah's healing didn't just change her life, it ignited faith in countless others. A nurse who'd been agnostic for 20 years started going to church again, saying she'd seen something science couldn't dismiss. Another patient with a similar diagnosis, who'd been preparing for hospice care, asked Sarah to pray with her. 3 months later, that patient's tumors also began shrinking. The doctors called it spontaneous remission. The patients called it what it was: God. Sarah started a prayer group at the hospital, something the administration initially resisted but eventually embraced when they saw the impact. Patients who faced impossible diagnoses found hope. Families drowning in despair found peace. And in a place designed to fight death with medicine, something else began to flourish: faith in a God who can heal beyond the reach of human hands. Maybe you're not facing cancer. Maybe your impossible situation looks different: a financial crisis that has no solution, a relationship that seems beyond repair, a dream that everyone says is unrealistic, a circumstance so overwhelming that every logical path forward is blocked. Maybe you've heard your own version of impossible from experts, from loved ones, from that cruel voice in your own head that whispers it's too late, too far gone, too damaged to fix. Here's what Sarah's story is really about. It's about the fundamental truth that God specializes in impossible situations. He's not intimidated by terminal diagnoses or closed doors or dead ends or statistics that say it can't be done. In fact, those are his favorite conditions to work in, because when he moves in the impossible, there's no doubt about who gets the credit. The doctor said impossible. Every test confirmed it. Every expert agreed. And yet, God said otherwise. And between what the doctors said and what God said, there was no contest. There never is. So here's the question that matters. What has been declared impossible in your life? What door has been slammed shut with such finality that you've stopped even praying about it? What dream has been buried under so much disappointment that you can't remember what hope felt like? Because if there's one thing Sarah's story proves, it's that human declarations of impossibility mean nothing to a God who spoke galaxies into existence, who parted seas, who raised the dead, who conquered the grave itself. Your impossible situation is not too big for him. It's not too complicated, too far gone, too late. The same God who rewrote Sarah's medical file can rewrite your story too. But here's what it requires: the same kind of faith Sarah demonstrated. Not a wishy-washy hope that maybe things will work out. Not a tentative, I'll believe it when I see it attitude. But a bold, audacious, all-in faith that says, I don't know how you're going to do this, God, but I believe you can. And I'm choosing to trust you even when nothing in my visible circumstances confirms it. That's the kind of faith that moves God's hand. That's the kind of trust that unlocks miracles. Sarah is alive today, more than 7 years past her expiration date. She's cancer-free, vibrant, and spending her life telling anyone who'll listen that God is still in the miracle business. Her medical file sits in a hospital archive somewhere, marked with notes from confused doctors and unexplained healing. But her real file, her true story, is written in heaven, in the handwriting of a God who looked at a terminal diagnosis and said, "Not this one. This one's mine." And friend, he's looking at your situation the same way. Whatever impossibility you're facing, whatever door has been closed, whatever diagnosis, medical, financial, relational, or otherwise, has been handed to you as final, God is saying, "Not this one. This one's mine." The question is, will you believe him? Will you take him at his word even when every visible circumstance contradicts it? Will you choose faith over facts, divine possibility over human probability? If you're watching this and you need a miracle, not a small favor, not a lucky break, but a genuine, no other explanation possible miracle, leave a comment right now. Type, "I believe God can do the impossible." Let that declaration be your first step of faith. Let this community pray with you. And if this story encouraged you, if it reminded you that God is bigger than any diagnosis you've received, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because we're building a community of people who refuse to accept impossibility as the final word. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that their story isn't over, that their impossible situation is God's perfect opportunity, and then watch what he does. Because when God says otherwise, everything changes. Everything.